Morning, everyone. So I'm going to discuss what really sounds like a minor scandal to begin with, or at least it sounds like something that's worth discussing. And then there's another layer of where it gets more ridiculous, more outrageous, really, and then another layer and another layer and another layer. So a probably not very well-known Conservative MP, George Freeman, who's had a range of different ministerial jobs in the past. The news came out yesterday as a result. He has a Substack, which is where they write blogs, but behind a paywall. And he wrote about why he quit his ministerial position last year. And it was because he said he couldn't afford to live on the ministerial salary. Now, I'm going to go through the various levels here to explain why this actually should be an outrage. So let's first of all just go through the bare bones of what, when it was initially announced in the news, what was the news. So George Freeman, MP, I mean, you get about £85,000 a year. I mean, we're talking about last year here. It's about 84,000 something pounds a year for being an MP, which for some people who have a lot of earning potential, yes, will sound not very much. But by an average person's standards, bear in mind you get lots of expenses, subsidized food, all the rest of it, is a nice salary. It's well over, it's actually closer to treble the national average than double, I think. Or it's about 2.5 times the median salary. And it's as a minister, you get an extra lump on top. So as a minister, he was on more than £118,000 a year. And he says he quit it because he couldn't afford it. Now, why could he afford it for a time and then suddenly not? Here's where it gets interesting. So he says because his mortgage payments last year went from £800 a month to £2,000 a month. Now, a couple of things here. First of all, he's highlighting the fact that mortgages have massively increased. His mortgage, he is claiming, has increased by 2.5. It's gone to 2.5 times what it was, going from 800 to 2,000. But second of all, £118,000 a year is still plenty to afford a £2,000 mortgage. But the other thing I want to go over is just where this, I just want to discuss before I go over to how it got even worse than this, is where we are with wages in the country, because it sounds ridiculous to anyone, to an ordinary person anywhere in the country, to say you cannot afford to live on £118,000 a year. So I'm just going to put up a little graphic. I've done a little bit of maths. So what I've got here are what the median wage has been in the UK in various years. Now, I've made these into 2023 values of the pound, right? Because obviously you can't just look at what was the median income in all of these years, because it always looks like it's going to go up. But you've got to take inflation into account. I use the Bank of England. There's lots of people say you should use this or that measure or whatever. There's lots of types of inflation. I use the Bank of England inflation calculator, which is used as CPI, because that's then, you can't say you're fiddling it. So if we look here, the data source I got this from, by the way, which is a filtered version of the Office for National Statistics. So it only went back to 1999. When it comes to the election and I want to spend a lot more time really doing this properly, I will spend the time and go right back to 1997. But for now, we've got 1999. So 2 years into the last Labour government. And in 2023 values, the median wage was 32,638. So that was 2 years into a Labour government. At the end of that Labour government, 2010, 11 years later, and this was after the banking crash, so wages had dipped a bit, it was in 2023 values, 38,263. So in those 11 years, that's not the full Labour government, that's just the last 11 years of it, of 13 years, so it is most of it. Labour, in real terms, increased average wages by 17.2%, if we use 2023 values of the pound. Now, before I go on, I'll just do the couple of super chats that have popped up. So Ed Catflat, £1 super chat, thank you very much. And Paul Ewan, £1.99. Graham challenge accepted. Okay, so there's something going off in the chat. But there we go. Right. So Labour, even with a global financial crash, still increased people's wages over an 11-year period by 17.2% in real terms. Again, the percentage will change if I'd have gone from 1999 to 2010 using 2010 values, right? I'm using 2023 values, but they increased it in real terms substantially. So then I thought, right, let's look at where they are now. Now, some people will say, well, if I just go straight for 2023, people say, oh, but COVID, and there was this, and there was that, and there was all the rest. So let's break it down. I thought, right, do 2015 first, so we can see what happened during the coalition years. During the coalition years, which brought austerity, remember, wages went down 4.6%. So in the first 5 years of the Tory government, which was the coalition years, incomes went down by 4.6% compared with when Labour were in power. Now, what should have happened, you might have had another year or two of wages going down a bit because of the effects of the global crash. But if you look at some other countries, what you then should have seen is them starting to go up. So over that 5-year period, they should have had wages going back up again. So then we go, okay, so let's then see what happened over the next few years. So you can see actually things got a bit better because by 2019, wages in real terms were only 2.7% lower than in 2010. So you could say they were catching up a bit. At the same time, they were still lower than in 2010. This is 9 years of a Tory government and wages have still not recovered to 2010 levels. So then we go, okay, where are we now? Because this is where we are. The fact of the matter is that Labour managed a huge financial crash. So why can't the Conservatives? Your wages on average are now 6.1% lower than in 2010. And it's worse than 6.1% lower. We're not saying that your wages are 6.1% lower than where they should be, because the Conservatives in 13 years, it's now nearly 14 years, should have been able to increase them. Look, Labour increased wages by 17.2% in an 11-year period. So the Tories shouldn't have kept them at the same level over a 13 and a half year period. They should have increased them as well. Now, I don't know how much is fair to say, but I think it is fair to say that people's wages will be, maybe you could even argue 15% lower than they should have been. So any Conservative who's moaning about wages, first of all, wants to take a look at what they've done to the economy. Because someone asked me recently, with the Tories, I did a short about this on my own channel yesterday. The Tories are hailing, record number of jobs. It's a lie, by the way. But rather than go over all that now, what I will say is, so if you're trying to, someone asked me, how do you argue with someone who's insisting this? I said, well, there's a few things you can do. But the most important thing to note is not all jobs are equal. Why do people do a job? You know, when you go to a job interview, and someone's and you're asked the inevitable question, why do you want this job? And you have to come up with some rubbish, don't you? But in reality, for the vast, and there are jobs that people really enjoy doing, but let's be honest, very few salaried workers would do that job for free, right? They will not do it for free. Why, if people were being completely honest, the question, why do you want this job? The answer would be, because I don't want to starve to death. It's really that simple. You're doing it for the money. You know, if you had an income of your own, you might, I mean, okay, you know, when I started doing this full time, I did a little bit of part-time teaching, which was actually technically a financial cost to me in terms of I could have spent the same time doing more on the channel. But at the same time, you know, because I liked doing that job, I valued it. So I carried on doing it while I could. But a lot of people, it's just they need the money. So if you want to judge how well a government has managed the economy, look at average wages in real terms. Have they grown your wages? Have they at least kept them the same if there's financial headwinds? Have they dropped them? The Tories have dropped them 6.1%. It's simple as that. So then let's go back to George Freeman MP and his affordability. So he says he cannot afford to live on £118,000 a year. So next little graph, I looked at take-home pay. So obviously you can't, I mean, I could say £118,000 a year. That is several times, it's more than treble the median average, but they will then say, but you know, you pay a higher rate of tax, right? That's assuming you pay your tax properly, which I assume he does, right? So let's look at take-home pay then. So a minister has, and this is based on, it's still the current year's taxes, but this is based on last year's tax rules. A minister takes home about 6,100, it's a little over £6,100 a month, right? So with a £2,000 mortgage, that still leaves you and that's by far the biggest chunk. When we talk about different costs of living around the country, remember, but the thing that it doesn't cost you more for a tin of beans in Tesco in Surrey as it does up here in North Lincolnshire, right? So what we're talking about is housing costs. That is the extra cost of living by and large. And we know a pint of beer is like, you need a mortgage for that in London. But by and large, the cost of living is housing costs. So if you take £2,000 off that, he's still got £4,100 a month after his housing costs. No ordinary person in the country is going to go, oh, you're totally hard up, aren't you? And yet he is arguing in his Substack that, we're pricing it out. We're making politics unaffordable for people. He's saying he can't afford, after his mortgage payment, after his housing costs, he cannot afford to live on £4,100 a year. A month. So let's look at what he and his colleagues are expecting. But before I do that, more super chats. So Ian too, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. The way I see it, if you can't cope on £98,000 per annum, you have an appetite problem. And Robolaris, thank you very much as well, £10 super chat. But this is the thing, like, this is what he's basically saying, albeit behind a paywall, but he must have known someone's going to report on it, right? The median average salary for last year, we don't know what it was for this year, because this year's still going on, we've only just started it. But for last year, was the take-home pay was just over £2,300 a month. So you've got an average worker, a Tory MP, you hear a Tory MP can't afford to live on £6,100 a month. And even when you take their mortgage out of the way, it's still £4,100 a month that they've got to live on. That could, that is the sort of bills that are the same price, generally speaking, around the country. I accept that his house insurance is probably more than an average person's in the north or something like that. But by and large, £4,100 is a piece of piss. Someone on a median wage is saying, well, hang on a minute, I've got to try and live on £2,300 a month after taxes. Someone on the minimum wage, which the Tories call the living wage. The Tories keep claiming they introduced this living wage. No, they didn't. Labour introduced the minimum wage, and the Tories opposed it. And then what they did is they changed the name to living wage and claimed that they started it. So what they claim the living wage is, if you work full time, so this is assuming a 37-hour week, which is standard full-time office hours, and you do that all year, 1,470, and this is actually just below. You don't quite get 1,470. So on the minimum wage, it's just below £1,470 a month take home. That is what the Tories call the living wage. That is what they say you can live on. He is saying he cannot live on £6,100 a month take home. Now, all of this straight away sounds pretty grim. I'm going to catch up with some comments in the chat and some questions before I go on to how this got way worse, because that sounds bad enough to me. That sounds to me like the sort of person who should not be an MP, because how can we talk about Rishi Sunak being out of touch, right? How can this MP possibly represent people, possibly talk about what people need, when he believes that ordinary people can live on £1,470 a month take home, but he cannot live on £6,100? That is a total disconnect there. Moranto saying they get all sorts of expenses too, don't they? I will tackle this, yeah, because I'll tell you what I don't do. I know some people do it, and I really don't do this. people will say, oh, but they claimed £200,000 a year expenses and stuff like that. They're not using that to like buy things on Amazon and get it paid on the taxpayers' money. When we talk about an MP's expenses, sometimes some fiddle it. Okay. So, and we had an expenses scandal some years ago. So, but when the vast majority of MPs are claiming genuine expenses, and when you say, oh, they claim £240,000 and stuff like that, that's for like staffing costs. That's not money in their pocket. That's staffing costs. It's accommodation costs. They need a constituency office in their constituents, right? And also an MP that's active in their constituency, does lots of surgeries. They need money for that. So actually, if you say, oh, well, this MP had £230,000 of expenses, this other MP had £250,000, and you think, well, why did they have to spend an extra 20,000? Maybe they're a better MP. Maybe they were doing more stuff in their constituency. The other thing is they need a second home in London, or they need an apartment or something like that, because they have to spend quite a lot of time in London. I mean, if you're from like the north of Scotland, I mean, it doesn't have to be the north of Scotland, but if you are, there are MPs in the north of Scotland who need to stay in London. Obviously, that is covered. So yeah, I wouldn't poke at expenses. I poke at subsidized meals, because you don't get subsidized meals in a normal job. You know, I've worked in places where you've got a cafeteria and you might go there for lunch and you pay yourself. That's not subsidized. You're paying full whack. In fact, in a school or a college, the cafeteria tends to be run by, it's contracted out, usually, almost always. So you're actually paying a private company for your beans on toast. So, and that's the other thing. You look at like the House of Commons. Well, not only do they get subsidized meals in their canteen, but they get like posh dinners. It's like, no. Have a normal canteen, right? Hot dinners, what have you got? You can have like chips and something, or lasagna, or baked potato with beans, or pasta with something like that. And then a range of sandwiches or muffins and biscuits. Just a normal canteen, right? Pay the normal amount. So you can have a poke at that. But expenses, I wouldn't have a poke with. But anyway, who was it that claimed heating for his horse's stables? That was Nadeem Zahawi. Yeah, that was dodgy. So there is some dodginess that does go on. Don't get me wrong. There is dodginess. But generally speaking, most MPs are very genuinely just claiming actual expenses. They are genuine expenses. The expenses I don't have an issue with. If politicians didn't have a second home in London, where would they take their mistress? Ooh. I wonder how many do have mistresses. But anyway, right, should we get on to the next bit? Because you think to yourself, because here's the inevitable question, right? George Freeman says he has to give up being a minister because he couldn't afford. And you think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, that means his pay is going from £118,000 a year down to back to like £84,000 a year. So he's actually losing himself money. So if he's claiming he can't afford a ministerial salary, why has he gone to an MP salary? Because as a minister, you are limited in extra income. You can't basically have second jobs as a minister. So he became a backbencher again, so he could take up second jobs. So you think, so we could get a second job that was worth more than the extra 30 grand. A lot more, right? Listen to this. This is in the Financial Times. They've been digging, right? So what it says is here. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, this is someone else. Oh, do you know what? I read it quickly and I missed, but I'll have to give you this as another example. I'm just trying to say, I misread something. I apologize. I nearly maligned him unfairly. But the fact that he's stopped from that will be to take up more lucrative work. I was reading this, but I'll just give you an example of someone else who did something similar, right? So in the Financial Times, Brandon Lewis, who has been a senior member of the government, a very senior member of the government, it says, since he quit the cabinet, Brandon Lewis has managed to gather nearly £500,000 a year in additional income with second jobs. So I actually read that first of all. I thought they were talking about George Freeman there. They're not. So it's not George. I don't know how much extra George Freeman is on. Although we do know that he quit his ministerial job so we could earn more money with second jobs. So must be earning at least 40 or more £1,000 a year extra. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been worth him giving up his ministerial position, right? But Brandon Lewis, and it also says here, not only is he earning £500,000 a year extra, this is on top of his MP salary, but his most controversial job, it says, is advising Letter One, which is a company 49% owned, so not quite majority owned, but a lot of it owned by 2 sanctioned Russian oligarchs. So being paid by people that his government has sanctioned as being wrong uns, right? But also you look at it this way, if someone can get £500,000 a year from second jobs and they're on £84,000 a year as an MP, who are they really working for? Because you think about it this way, let's say you had just 2 jobs. In reality, this Brandon Lewis thing is multiple jobs for the 500,000. But let's say you had 2 major sources of income. One was from job A and one was from job B. Now, if job A is paying you £84,000 a year, first of all, that sounds quite nice. But job B is paying you £500,000 a year. Which one are you going to prioritize? Where do your priorities lie? And this is the thing. This is why I don't think MPs should draw an additional income at all. I think because I think even those who need to do a second job to like as a doctor or a lawyer to maintain registrations, I think the salary they draw should be donated. I think it should be donated. I also think if anyone even has like shareholdings or something like that, then the income from them should also be donated. I mean, ideally, they shouldn't have them at all because they can still make decisions as a minister that favor them in the long run when they then leave Parliament, right? They can still build them up. But at the very least, they should not be drawing additional salary. Any MP that says they cannot survive on £84,000 a year should not be an MP, because yes, you can. Especially when you're having your second home, you're having expenses covered. 84, none of that £84,000 a year has to be spent on your job. And there are plenty of people who have a normal job who spend some of their salary on that job. I, as a teacher, particularly when the Tories were in power, I used to spend money on like supplies in my classroom because budgets were being cut. So I used to sometimes buy things for my job, but sometimes it wasn't just to do with budgets. Sometimes I just wanted something to help me do my job better, and I would just buy it. So people do that. There are people who have certain jobs where they spend, at the very least, they spend money on petrol getting to work and back. MPs don't. Even if MPs are just working around their constituency, they get travel expenses for that as well, and subsistence. I hate that word. Costs as well. So no, anyone, don't matter where you are in the country, anyone can live on £84,000 a year, because there are people everywhere in the country being expected to live on on £20,000 a year or a take home of £1,470 per month, right? So I think all MPs should have investments in UK gilts, nothing else. Well, no, because you can screw that as well. No, it should ideally nothing at all, because it doesn't matter what the investment is in, you can still screw it. Unless you can somehow force them to invest in people, but that's not the case. I mean, you could maybe even link, how in like private business, you have bonuses, right? You have a bonus for if the company performs above the model, then you get bonuses. Maybe MPs could do that. Maybe there could be MP bonus for MPs if they are able to grow the economy. If the average income goes up, there can be certain metrics where if you achieve this, then you get a bonus. So it can be, for example, median incomes. It can be, for example, the economy, GDP. And just say, if the certain metrics which are of national benefit, if you hit certain targets, which can be decided. Obviously, they'd have to be decided by MPs, decided by a cross-party group of MPs. But if you can hit certain targets, you get a bonus. That might, if they want more money, that could be a way to do it. MPs need advice from 30p Lee on how to budget. Yes, indeed. MPs are given gifts like tickets to sport and theatre tickets just for being an MP. That is true. That being said, they're not essential. So again, I don't worry about things like that. I mean, like, it's nice. Don't worry, get me wrong. It's a nice little perk. Again, I don't have an issue with that. Don't have a problem with that. As long as they're not doing favours in return. These sort of things are declared. As long as they're not doing favours in return, don't have an issue with it. There's nothing wrong with an MP, for example, attending a football match in their local constituency as a guest. No issue with that at all. In terms of gifts, obviously, there are certain gifts they're not supposed to accept, but, But yeah, performance-related bonuses for MPs, as long as it doesn't encourage even more short-termism. Well, the nature of our democracy does that anyway, because you're always focusing on the next election, which is a maximum of 5 years away. So there's always a bit of short-termism in it. I think PR would sort of help that, because you'd have, ironically, more stable directions, not necessarily more stable governments, but more stable directions, because you're unlikely to get huge sea changes of government. Like in this country, when we switch between a Labour and Conservative government, the tilt is always very sudden and very obvious. All these people say, oh, there's no difference between Labour and Conservatives. Absolute hogwash. In the first year of either a Labour or a Conservative government, when it's flipped from one to the other, if you cannot tell massive differences in that first year, you are not paying attention. So it's always, whereas if you had proportional representation, you may get changes of government, but it wouldn't, you're probably not talking huge U-turns on things. Second job should just be blanket banned. Ultimately, if you have a second job worth £500,000, then quit being an MP. If the second job is contingent on the first, that says it all. Well, yes, as well. In terms of second jobs being blanket banned, so there are caveats, I would always say. For example, there are some jobs you have to be able to carry on doing, like doctor or lawyer, to maintain registrations. It's not fair to say to someone who wants to become an MP, because here's the thing, you can become an MP for just like half a year. Like the by-elections that are coming up at the moment. So we've got 3 by-elections coming up next month, right? 2 Tory ones, one because a Labour MP died in Rochdale. So we've got 3 by-elections coming up next month, not all on the same day. And though the people who win those seats, in theory, might only be MPs for just over 2 months. So you can't say to someone, oh, you've spent 20 years training for this job and you have to give it all up, and you might only be an MP for a few years, and then you can't even go back to that job. That's not right. So it's fair to say people can do jobs to maintain registrations, but you can still say, but you donate your salary. Donate the salary. You don't keep it, right? And no, you don't get to set up your own charity and donate it to that. You donate it to an established charity, right? But then there's other things as well. Like, let's say an MP owns a business. They don't have to dissolve that business and sack all their employees, right? It's fine for the business to still exist. Someone else has to manage it. You're not allowed to manage it. And again, you're not allowed to draw an income from that business while you're an MP. I'd still say that. It gets donated to charity. Donated to charity, right? Not stored up so you then draw that cash out when you leave. You donate it to charity. You might say an MP, let's say I'd become an MP and I'm still doing the channel. I could still do the channel, but I'd be expected to donate my income to charity. So it's the financial inducements for me. Allow people to have certain, not just any, I mean, Labour are going to ban the lobbying anyway. Lobby jobs are going, as far as I understand. Although that may just be for ministers. No, I think that's everyone. No, I think that's everyone. Don't make sense. The ministers aren't allowed to join lobby groups anyway. So yeah, so just say You can do certain types of jobs, but you don't gain financially from it. In other words, while you're an MP, the only income you have is from your MP stipend. And have it like that. And also force all MPs to declare all of their financial interests, all of them. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, he doesn't have to declare his millions of pounds worth of investments, tens of millions worth of investments, right? He doesn't have to declare it. So he doesn't have to declare what he makes. Make them declare it. Make them say, what are all your financial, and make it a serious criminal offense to mislead. That's what I would do. But this is an absolutely ridiculous case. Someone's saying they cannot manage on £6,100 a month take home when they have no, like that person, the person on £1,470 a month take home, not only do they have to live on significantly less, like a quarter of the amount, they've got to pay for their travel to get to work. They've got to pay to, like, you know, feed themselves at work potentially. You know, they have got to pay to get to work, to manage work. But there we go. When am I running for MP? I'm not. I sort of I threw my hat into the ring once, and someone threw it straight back out again. So that's that. But there we go. MP should get basic salary, national average. That'll get up. No. Right. No. MPs should have a decent wage. I've got no issue with MPs having a decent wage. I've got no issue with the idea of an MP salary being, I'd even put it up. I'm happy to put it up. I would pay MPs £150,000 a year on the understanding that that is their only income, right? I don't think MPs should have to, no, I don't think that at all. There's no need for that. Let's, being an MP, be a decent job. Just don't earn money anywhere else, because your priorities must lie with your source of income. But there we go. I disagree with declaring your interest. You should be audited. Well, I'm not suggesting that we trust MPs to tell the truth. But part of being audited is declaring things. You can't be audited if you haven't declared anything. But there we go. I think I've been naive. A lot of their expenses spent on them. No, a small amount of expenses are the sort of things that if you look at it would think you don't really need that. No, almost 99% of their expenses are for staffing costs, travel, the second home, office costs, things like that. Because you can see the breakdown. It is a matter of public record, not just how much they claim in expenses. If you want to find out what your MP spends their expenses on, you can find out. You just ask for the information and you can see the breakdown yourself. But anyway, we've sort of gone over there. Thank you very much for coming on. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I will see you later.